In the last video, we met Guts, the Black Swordsman, a nomadic warrior on a quest to find the mysterious God Hand. This quest brought Guts to the town of Coda, where, while inside of a tavern, he killed several thugs, leaving only one alive so he can deliver a message to his boss, an apostle known as the Baron. The apostles are monsters disguised as humans who serve the God Hand. The Black Swordsman has come. It's here that Guts meets an unlikely ally, an elf named Puck, after Guts inadvertently frees Puck by killing his captors. Later, when the Baron hears word of the Black Swordsman's arrival, the evil apostle starts burning down the village of Coda to find the intruder. Emerging from a pile of corpses, Guts battles with the apostle. He defeats the Snake Baron while interrogating him about the whereabouts of the God Hand. He leaves the Baron burning alive as he walks away, leaving Coda in ruins. Later, after witnessing the execution of suspected heretics in another village, Guts makes his presence known to another apostle, the Count. The town's guard, led by their captain named Zondark, corner Guts and attempt to subdue him. This leads to another battle where Guts kills most of the town's guards with ease. He ends up disfiguring Zondark before escaping through the sewers with the help of a mysterious man named Vargas. Once in his lab, Vargas reveals that he once worked for the Count as a physician. He tells Guts that he will show him a secret passage into the castle as long as he promises to kill the Count. We learn that Vargas stole a mysterious object from the Count years prior, the Behelit. Guts recognizes this strange object. He says it's a key to another world, one that will lead him right into the God Hand. Eventually, the Count, who has possessed the body of Captain Zondark, crashes into Vargas's lab, forcing the group to run away again. Here, they part ways, and Guts takes the Behelit for himself. Vargas ends up getting captured by the Count anyway, and is later executed as Guts and Puck watch from the crowd. After using the secret passage to get to the Count, Guts storms the castle and fights his way to the Count's quarters. Here, the Count transforms into his true apostle form, which is a giant slug-like monster. The Count initially overpowers Guts. That is until Guts takes the Count's daughter, Thracia, hostage after Puck freed the girl from her room. This distraction allows Guts to hit the Count with his cannon arm before cutting his head off with his mighty sword. Guts starts torturing the Count while taunting Thracia with the severed head. As a last-ditch effort, the Count activates the Behelit, and the group are transported into a strange-looking dimension. Here, the group encounter the 5 members of the God Hand. The Guardians of Desire, Chapter 5. Back in the Void, Guts gets violently angry when he sees one of the members of the God Hand, Femto. Guts is so beat up from his conflict with the Count that all he can do is squirm around on the ground. Still, squirming around your pitiful existence I see. The God Hand turn their attention over to the Count, who is still just a bleeding head on the ground after Guts decapitated him. You, who have been ordained by the laws of fate, your desperate desire for life has cleaved open space and brought us here. At first, I thought it was the Count's blood that activated the Behelit. It turns out, it was the Count himself that called upon the God Hand's assistance. He used the Behelit to open the door to them, and now they're here. The Count makes a wish that the God Hand will kill Guts for him. Surprisingly, they say no. They tell the Count that his wish for Guts' death is based on his attachment to life and his fear of dying, and not for his actual hatred for Guts. And because of this, they will not kill him. The Count tries to reason with them. Guts has killed multiple apostles, who are servants to the God Hand. He has a vendetta against them. That was his whole reason for acquiring the Behelit to begin with. They should consider him an enemy. Black Swordsman, you say? His petty existence is beneath our notice. Femto seems to be acting particularly cruel to Guts, while the other God Hands seem mostly indifferent. This angers Guts, and he actually starts to stand. The members of the God Hand marvel that Guts can stand even with all his injuries he sustained. One of the other members of the God Hand notices Guts' pure disdain for Femto, the one who gave Guts the mark of sacrifice. Guts, with whatever tiny bit of strength he has left, starts climbing the stairs to Femto. As he gets closer, his mark starts shooting out blood again. Don't you know that your brand responds to demon kind and causes you pain? For lesser demons, you might feel little more than a needle prick. But the greater the demon, the greater the response, increasing your pain without end. And if that demon is too great, the pain might even kill you. We've seen how the brand on Guts' neck has reacted before. Whenever we've seen Guts get close to evil before, his brand will usually start to cause him some pain, and at most, it might start to bleed a little bit. We understand that the more powerful the entity, the more of a reaction his brand will have. In the presence of the God Hand, his mark shoots out blood violently. He kneels over in pain. It almost incapacitates him. The God Hand are more powerful than anything Guts has faced before. The pain for Guts is too great, and he starts to fall back. He still attempts to get a swing on Femto. Without even moving a hand, Femto pushes Guts back with a power we have not seen yet. It seems Femto may have inadvertently granted the Count his wish. The lead God Hand, the one they call Void, says there are to be no more distractions. It is time for the invocation of doom. For this ritual, the Count will need to make a sacrifice. At first, he tries to give them Guts, but this won't work, as Guts already holds the mark of sacrifice given to him by Femto. Regardless of the mark, the sacrifice needs to be someone close to him, someone important to him, someone so close to him it would almost be like he's giving up a part of himself. By making such a sacrifice to demonkind, you'll be able to sever any last remnants of your own humanity. A fissure in your heart will open up, to which evil will surge. This begs the question on whether the members of the God Hands were all once humans who sacrificed themselves and loved ones to become the demonic entities they are now. Is that what Femto did to Guts? This means when Femto was human, him and Guts were close. Friends. But that was a long time ago. Things are quite different now. Femto has become an all-powerful demon, and Guts has become an angry husk that knows nothing but hatred and war. The God Hand tells the Count that he needs to sacrifice his own daughter, Theresia, to complete the ritual. This makes the Count very upset. As much of a monster he has become, he can't sacrifice his own daughter. The squid-like God Hand tells him to do what he did last time. He's already made a sacrifice. This is how he became the parasitic apostle we saw all throughout the last chapters. The God Hand show Theresia what her father did. 7 years ago, the Count was just a normal human. We see him with his wife and a much younger Theresia, a noble man and his beautiful, virtuous wife. A family, the very picture of happiness. The Count begs them to stop showing Theresia what happened. They ignore him and continue with their show. Earlier, Theresia told Puck that her mother was kidnapped by the pagans for ransom and killed after the king refused to negotiate. We learn that was a lie told to her by the Count. The real story is much darker. At the time, the land was overrun by pagans. In an attempt to destroy the heretics, the Count hunted them down throughout his kingdom. Hence, he was often away from the castle. But one day, exhausted from a long, harsh heretic hunting campaign, the Count rushed back to the arms of his beloved wife and daughter in order to soothe his soul. And that's when it happened. The Count walks into a ritualistic orgy being performed in front of a Baphomet statue. One of the many participants is the Count's wife. While the Count was out hunting for heretics all day, he failed to see that his own wife was one the whole time. Theresia can't believe what she's seeing. She tries to block it out, but the God Hand just continue with their torment. After witnessing such a bizarre sight, the Count went mad and killed everyone in the orgy, except for his once wife. Despite his anger and pain, the Count is unable to kill his wife. He was going to end his own life, but it just so happens that the Behelit was on the table next to him. All his pain and sorrow was enough to call forth the God Hand. The Count begs them to save him from his suffering. In return, he'll do anything they want. They tell him that they will grant his wish, but first, he must make a sacrifice. This is when he gives up his wife. The God Hand transforms him into the demonic monster we know, and he tears his wife limb from limb. They tell him that they will grant him another wish, as long as he sacrifices Theresia. Guts tells Puck to heal his right arm so he can use it. The Guardians of Desire, Chapter 6. We see a much younger looking Guts sitting in the middle of a battlefield, and we see a man who looks a lot like Femto offering him a hand. He tells Guts about his desires. He wants to know his place in the universe. What was he made for? What is his destiny? This is clearly a very different Guts than the one we see today. He's younger. He still has his eye in his hand, and he doesn't have the mark of sacrifice yet. And Femto, or Griffith, as he was called then, is kind to Guts. He's ambitious and almost hopeful. This is a far cry from the hateful and spiteful godlike being they called Femto. This is clearly a long time ago. Back in the Void, the God Hand are still waiting for the Count to sacrifice his daughter. Puck rushes towards Theresia. Guts stops the little elf and tells him that unless he wants her to bear the same mark that he does, he needs to heal his arm enough so he can use it. In reality, Guts probably cares very little for the girl's life. His only focus is Femto. or Griffith, as he was once called. The God Hand tell the Count that if he doesn't sacrifice his daughter, then they will take his life instead. Femto has summoned some kind of soul tornado to them. Puck can feel the evil energy come from this great tempest. Endless and evil. What is it? It's enormous. An endless swirl of consciousness, as if all evil in the world has gathered here. Millions of souls are trapped within the tornado, an endless storm of pain and hate. This is hell itself. It's here to claim its next soul. When the Count's physical form dies, his soul will be taken away down to the low depths of hell by the Tempest. That's the price you pay when you sell your soul to the God Hand. He has two choices: sacrifice Thracia and return to his demon form, or sacrifice himself and live eternity in hell. The God Hand tried to get him to give Thracia up for the sacrifice. Despite the monster the Count has become, despite his inhuman actions and terrible deeds, even he can't sacrifice his own daughter. So cold. All my blood is flowing out of my body. Is this the end for me? Only to die as some carved-up monster, wretched and horrible, only to be sucked into that vortex for all eternity. No, I don't want to die. The Count looks within his daughter's eyes one last time before the soul storm grabs him and drags him to hell. Among the vast amounts of souls, both Puck and Guts see that Vargas is one of the ghastly apparitions dragging the Count into damnation. It seems that even from beyond the grave, Vargas kept his promise to the Count. Though Guts despised Vargas, most likely because he saw himself in him, I do think there was a certain level of respect Guts had for him. He was a mortal who swore vengeance against a demon like the Count. Vargas was a human being who stood no chance against the likes of the Count while he was alive. It was silly to even think he could do anything. But that's not much different from the vendetta Guts has for the God Hand. They are godlike beings that treat him like dirt. Yet, he has set out on this blood-soaked journey just for the chance to reach them. In a lot of ways, Vargas and Guts were quite similar. Thracia looks on in horror as her once loving father is being forever taken away from her. The Soulstorm comes back and grabs Guts' legs. He still has the mark on his neck. That's how the souls know to grab him. They start dragging him down to hell too. While in the air, he's able to load his arm cannon and get a shot off at Femto. This still has no effect on him. However, the blast causes the souls to let go of Guts. Guts, Thracia, and Puck are now back in the real world. The Count's lifeless body is there as well. Puck tries to comfort Thracia, but it's far too late. The poor girl is hysterical. She says that she'd rather be dead than stay in the castle. Guts tells her to go ahead and do it. Puck rightfully slaps him. Come on, it's simple. All you have to do is slit your wrist with that thing. Then it'll all be over. The end of your worries. You'll probably end up going to heaven. Or would you prefer hell? At least that way, you might get to see your father and mother. Guts has never exactly shown much kindness to anyone, but he's being needlessly cruel here. Downright heartless. It's your life. Do what you want with it. Thracia takes the knife and goes to gut her wrist. Puck flies in and blocks her. The floor gives in and Thracia starts falling. Guts puts his sword out so she can catch it. Normally, Guts would have no problem holding up a sword, but he's already very weak, so now Thracia is holding onto it. It's only adding to the weight. He's really struggling to hold her up. Despite the pain, he's able to pull her up and toss her to the other side. I mentioned in the last video that there's a lot of times when Guts' words don't exactly match his actions. A minute ago, he was telling Thracia to go ahead and end her life, but now he's going out of his way to stop the girl from falling. Whatever happened to Guts to make him the way he is today took a lot of his humanity away. But deep down, somewhere inside of him, I think there's still a shred of humanity left. Even when he was telling Thracia to go through with it, I think it was more to prove a point. Like he was saying, go ahead, go through with it, if you want to be weak, if you want to give up on life like your father did. She blames Guts for everything that's happened. She might have been stuck in her room all day, but at least she still had her father before Guts arrived. Now, the poor girl has nothing. She damns him and says that one day she will kill Guts herself. He welcomes the challenge. You would have thought this would have led to something later on in the manga, but from my understanding, this is the last we see of Thracia. As the two walk away from the girl, Puck notices that Guts is crying. What could have Femto done to Guts to actually make him cry? To make him as terrified as he was? What happened to Guts? Well, we're actually gonna kind of get our answer. This is the end of the Black Swordsman arc. Next is what many people consider not only the best arc in Berserk, but to be one of the best arcs in all of manga or anime, the Golden Age arc. Essentially, the Golden Age arc is one giant flashback. We see what led Guts on the dark path he's on now, from his early childhood all the way to adulthood right before the start of the Black Swordsman arc. While not being Berserk's longest arc, the Golden Age is quite lengthy, especially for what serves essentially as one giant flashback. Mir said that for the most part, he was making everything up as he went, even after 3 whole volumes. He didn't know where the story was really going yet, but I think he was starting to get there. He only knew one thing at this point. He knew that Berserk was going to be a story about anger. That was the basic premise. The rest of it kinda came along as he continued drawing. Up until volume 3, all I had in mind was that the story would be about anger. In preparation for starting the series, first I asked myself what it was that I had to pay attention to, and what I decided was that I would make sure the character was angry. So then I asked myself how to make him angry. There are a lot of ways to depict anger. There's the explosive kind of anger, but then there's the kind of anger where your face just loses its color and goes expressionless. I decided I would just focus on expressing anger and hope I'd find something to work with. The Golden Age, Chapter 1. This chapter begins when a group of mercenaries, led by a man named Gambino, stumble across an infant lying on the ground. The child's mother was hanged, and the baby was born from its dead mother's corpse. At first, they all think the baby is dead until it starts crying. Under the dead body of its mother, the baby made its birthing cries, cradled in a mire of blood and afterbirth. One woman with the mercenaries, named Shisu, begs Gambino to let her take the infant with them. At first, Gambino's apprehensive, but he takes sympathy on Shisu, as she just had a miscarriage only days before. One of the mercenaries says it's a bad omen to find a child born in such an evil place. Gambino just laughs it off and continues their journey. He will later grow to regret not taking this advice. If it wasn't clear already, this baby is Guts. We cut to 3 years later. Shisu has the plague and she's dying. We learn that Gambino and Shisu are together, but he's off in battle and he can't be there for her dying moments. She calls out to Guts as her life slowly slips away. The closest thing Guts ever knew to a parent is gone, a mere 3 years after she found him. We cut to another 3 years later. Guts is around 6 years old and he's already on the battlefield assisting Gambino and his men. Despite only being a child, Gambino is just as harsh to Guts as he is to the other soldiers. As early as his infancy, we can see the seeds being planted for the kind of man Guts was to become later on in life. He was born from violence and death. His mother was hanged and left to rot. Growing up, all Guts saw was death, blood, and war. That's why he seems so desensitized to it later on in his life, because it's literally all he knows. After the battle, we see Gambino training with Guts. Being so small, Guts has to train with a regular-sized sword. This is where he got used to wielding a sword way too big for him, something that would stick with him for his entire life. Gambino is ruthless to Guts, cutting him all over his hands and face. Despite clearly being outmatched, Guts is still able to get a swing on Gambino and cut his face. Even as an adolescent child, Guts still has amazing promise to be a great warrior one day. Probably getting embarrassed from this, Gambino takes a cheap shot and punches Guts in the nose. Even the other mercenaries step in and telling him he's going too far. Later that night, Guts starts feeling the effects from his sparring session with Gambino. He's fallen ill and has a fever. Hot. So hot. My face feels like it's on fire. My nose clogged with blood. My head so heavy I can't breathe. Guts overhears some of the mercenaries talking about him. They say he's a bad omen, and that he's the reason Shisu caught the plague. I wouldn't be surprised if Gambino put the men up to this, just so Guts could hear them. We cut to another 3 years later. Guts is about 9 now. He isn't even in the double digits yet, and he's already familiar with the battlefield. Guts proves to be a formidable warrior, but he's still just a kid. His helmet gets knocked off by a soldier. The soldier goes for a killing blow, but Guts stabs him through his helmet. This is probably Guts' first kill on the battlefield. He gets sidelined by a much bigger soldier. He might be good, but he stands no chance against a warrior this big. Luckily for Guts, Gambino saves him. Later, after the battle is over, Gambino makes a private deal with a fellow mercenary named Donovan. That night, when Guts is trying to fall asleep, Donovan comes into his tent and forces himself on him. Guts tries to grab his sword, but he's too late. Now we know what the meeting between Gambino and Donovan was about. Gambino sold Guts for a night. I said there was probably the reason why Guts hated being touched so much, and now I think that reason is clear. The Golden Age, Chapter 2. This chapter continues with Donovan's assault on Guts. It's pretty graphic. Obviously, I can't nor do I want to show everything. But the important thing to know is that Donovan tells Guts that he paid Gambino so he could take advantage of him. Guts tries to fight back, but Donovan overpowers him. I think what happens next is fairly obvious. The next morning, Guts walks out of his tent with his sword. His body is covered in bruises and marks. He's going to try and kill Donovan, and maybe even Gambino. However, after Gambino tells Guts to go about his daily chores like nothing happened, Guts thinks maybe Donovan was lying when he said Gambino sold him for the night. He decides to keep what happened to himself. Later, when the mercenaries get into another skirmish, Guts shoots Donovan through the back with an arrow when no one's looking. He shoots him again through the mouth, and Donovan falls off his horse. While on the ground, Guts stabs him through the mouth. He starts to cry, but he's able to get himself together and ride away. Back in the battle, Gambino gets hit by a cannon. He lives, but he loses his leg. Guts stays with Gambino the entire night. 2 years later, we see Guts back on the battlefield. He has improved a lot as a warrior. He's only 12 years old, yet he's an incredible force on the battlefield, cutting through fully grown men like it's nothing. He even kills the army's general, an accomplishment he's very proud of, and even tells Gambino about it. Gambino has had a hard time adjusting to life without his leg. He feels that the other men look down on him and mock him. He blames Guts for losing his leg. This clearly upsets Guts. Later, when Guts is trying to sleep, Gambino sneaks into his tent. He intends to kill him. He tries to swing on him. Luckily, Guts is able to get out of the way. He blames Guts for all his misfortune, for him losing his leg, and for Shisu's death. He treats him like a bad omen, just like the one mercenary said, "You should have died on that day 11 years ago, beneath your mother's corpse. You should have died." As one last cruel act before he kills him, Gambino tells Guts that he did sell him to Donovan that night, for 3 silver coins. Luckily for Guts, Gambino can only swing his sword with his non-dominant hand, so when Gambino goes for a full killing blow, Guts is able to counter him and stab him in the neck. The Golden Age, Chapter 3. This chapter starts right where the last chapter ended. Guts has nearly decapitated Gambino. He falls on top of him. During the fall, a lantern hits the ground, and Guts' tent sets on fire. Some of the other mercs go to help. They see Guts standing over Gambino. They try to grab Guts, but he's able to slip away and steal one of the horses. The rest of the mercs band together and start chasing after him. He's an evil omen, a cursed kid who's nothing but bad luck. I think the idea of Guts being a bad omen is kind of interesting, because for the most part, it seems to be true. He leads a path of death and destruction almost everywhere he goes. He's ruined the lives of multiple people he's come in contact with. Just look back at what happened to the priest and his daughter. That never would have happened if Guts never got in their carriage. We know Guts was cursed when he got the brand of sacrifice on his neck, but could he be that he was already cursed long before that as well? The other mercs chase Guts away until he's against a cliffside. One of the mercs shoots his shoulder, which causes him to fall off the cliff. Somehow, Guts is alive, but he's in pretty bad shape. He just lies down and looks at the stars for a while. Eventually, he gets up, but he can barely stand. Where am I going anyway? Would have been easier just to lie there and die like that. There'd be nothing anymore. Here, there's only bad stuff. So where? A pack of wolves surround Guts. They are hungry, and he's really hurt. Things are not looking good. Guts will never go down without a fight, but here he almost accepts his fate. He's barely able to reach his sword out enough to catch the first wolf in the air. Soon enough, Guts is on the ground, but he hasn't given up, even if at this moment he really wants to. He slashes his way through the rest of the pack. Eventually he's able to get to his feet and fight off the wolves until the last few run away. Exhausted, he collapses again. Eventually, another group of mercenaries find him and take them along with them. 4 years later, Guts is now a teenager and working as a mercenary for hire. There's a giant warrior named Bazuso tearing through the battlefield. No one stands a chance against him. That is, until Guts accepts his challenge of combat. Guts' speed and power quickly overwhelm his much bigger opponent. Bazuso goes for a swing, but his great axe ends up colliding with Guts' sword. Guts cuts through Bazuso's ribs before splitting his head down the middle. The Golden Age, Chapter 4. Thanks to Guts killing Bazuso, the knights are able to advance on the army. Some of the enemy soldiers watch in amazement at Guts' strength, one of these soldiers being Griffith, looking very different than his demon form when he's called Femto. After the battle, the knight who hired Guts gives him a reward for killing Bazuso. He's so impressed with Guts that he even offers to take him in as an apprentice. Guts declines and starts to walk away. the knight makes the mistake of grabbing Guts by the arm, and he slaps it away. Now we know what Guts unfortunately suffered as a child. It makes a lot more sense why he despises being touched. Later, as Guts is walking through a field, the same soldiers who were admiring his swordsmanship find him again. They're mercenaries, just like Guts. One of the mercs, Corcus, says they should rob him and steal the reward he got for killing Bazuso. Corcus asks the merc's leader, Griffith, if he can do it. Griffith tells him he can do as he wishes. They suit up and go to rob Guts. He acts quickly and slices one of the mercs right in half. Then, he cuts the arm off a mace-wielding merc. Corcus decides to retreat. Griffith tells one of his mercenaries, a girl named Keska, to go and take care of it. She shoots Guts in the arm with her crossbow when he goes to kill Corcus. Keska goes to strike Guts on horseback. At first, she proves to be a formidable opponent for Guts. Guts is able to knock off her helmet, and he's shocked when he sees he's fighting a woman. All of the mercs are amazed that Guts is not only keeping up with Keska, but even pushing her back. Other than the merc's leader, Griffith, she's the strongest warrior they have. It looks like Guts is about to kill her before Griffith comes in with his armor on. I noticed how the armor he's wearing now holds a striking resemblance to the one he wears when he's femto. Guts tries to get the jump on him, but Griffith is too fast. He's able to repose every strike he throws at him. Griffith is able to stab Guts through his breastplate. He's not trying to kill him though, he only stabs him in the shoulder. Despite being in great pain and bleeding a lot, Guts is still standing. Keska goes to challenge him again, but Griffith tells her to stand aside. He goes to strike Griffith, but ends up passing out from the blood loss mid-swing. The Golden Age, Chapter 5. Guts is having a nightmare. A giant naked monster chases him. This is likely a metaphor for Donovan. The monster goes to grab Guts. He slices the monster's hand, but it vanishes. Then, he has a vision of Gambino. Guts begs Gambino to help him. Despite how cruel Gambino was to him, he's the closest thing to a father figure Guts has ever known. Gambino, save me. Cutting this thing with a sword doesn't work. Gambino? Don't be ridiculous. That's my right leg you got in your hand, isn't it? Without that, I can't even use a sword. Besides, did you forget? You shoved your sword right through my throat. It hurts. A lot. Even in death. The dog Gambino had when he was alive now has Shisu's plague-ridden head on it. A giant version of Donovan grabs him from behind. Despite how horrible Gambino was to him, Guts still begs him for forgiveness. Despite the fact that Gambino was going to kill him, he still feels guilty for killing Gambino. Guts starts saying, "Don't touch me, don't touch me," as we see a naked Keska lying down next to him. Eventually, Guts wakes up from his nightmare. He forgets where he is for a moment, then he remembers his duel with Griffith. He's in the merc's camp. He's surprised when he sees how young all the mercs are here, around his age or even younger. Then, he sees Griffith and Keska from across the camp. They seem to be having some kind of disagreement. Without warning, she walks right up to Guts and punches him in his wounded shoulder. "I wish you died after Griffith was through with you." One of the mercs, Judo, tells Guts that the reason for Keska's anger towards him is because she was ordered by Griffith to sleep with Guts to keep him warm after losing so much blood. She gave up being a woman when she became a merc. She is one of the best fighters the mercenaries have. She found this task to be demeaning to her. Griffith comes up and asks us to accompany him somewhere else. He asks Griffith who exactly they are. He says they're the Band of the Hawk. Going off the look on Guts' face, I'm going to say he's heard of them before. The Band of the Hawk, one of the last merc groups you'd ever want to meet up with on the battlefield. Thanks to them being on the other side, this last castle siege should have been over in 3 days, but it took over 3 months. Still, I never noticed during the battle. To think they'd all be so young. When they are alone, Guts asks Griffith why he didn't stab him through the heart. He says it's because he wants him. After witnessing Guts kill Bazuso, Griffith decided he wanted to recruit Guts into the Hawks. He tells Guts that while his fighting ability was impressive, it was also clumsy and dangerous. If Bazuso's axe didn't break, he would have crushed Guts' skull in. He says every time Guts gets into a battle, he gambles with his own life. He's gotten lucky thus far, but eventually that luck is going to run out. We see Keska is spying on the two behind a tree. She clearly isn't happy. Guts takes offense to the proposal because he feels like Griffith is talking down to him. Despite being in no shape to fight, he picks up his sword and challenges Griffith to a duel. He gives him a wager. If Guts wins, he'll stab Griffith in the chest right where he stabbed him. If Griffith wins, then he'll accept his offer and join the Hawks. Griffith accepts this challenge. Keska tries to intervene once again, but Griffith tells her to stay out of it. Their duel starts. The rest of the Hawks join in to watch. At first, Guts is able to keep up with Griffith, but he knows he's not going to be able to keep up this pace much longer. Griffith is just a little too fast for him. He slices Guts' arms. How'd he do that? I'm confident I can slice through even steel plate with his sword. He's parrying all my attacks with that narrow blade, and damn well doing it with just one hand. This guy's good. Instead of anger, Guts seems thrilled to finally have a worthy opponent. The two start fighting again. Corkus and the other mercs want to step in and help Griffith kill Guts just to get it over with. Casca reminds them that Griffith ordered none of them to intervene. Griffith keeps slicing Guts' arms and legs up. He's not trying to kill him. That would defeat the purpose of the challenge. He's only trying to hurt him enough to get him to surrender. Guts has had enough and decides to go for a big overhead swing. In an amazing show of athleticism and skill, Griffith jumps up and lands right on Guts' Dragon Slayer. Everyone, including Guts, is thoroughly impressed. Guts can't swing his sword like this. Not to mention, Griffith's sword is right at his throat. It seems Guts has been beaten. Well, not quite yet. He does have one more trick up his sleeve. The Golden Age, Chapter 6. Guts grabs Griffith's sword in his mouth and throws him off of the Dragon Slayer. They both fall to the ground. Guts lands on top of him and starts punching. The rest of the mercs are completely shocked. Griffith is the best warrior they've ever seen. They've never seen him in a losing position before. Casca looks especially shocked. We can see there's a lot of worry and fear in her eyes. She clearly cares a lot for Griffith. Guts goes for a finishing blow. Griffith is able to grab his arm and pin him to the ground. After struggling for a while, Guts finally gives up. Griffith has won the duel. The rest of the Hawks start to congratulate him. Now, you belong to me. Despite some protests from the rest of the mercs, especially from Casca, Guts is now a Hawk. For Casca, though, her protests are more than just general feelings of disdain for Guts. She's also jealous of him, for the attention and emotion he's able to get from Griffith. He's never said that before. Griffith's never said a thing like that. I want you. Not to anybody. Later, as Guts is laying down in his tent, he hears some of the Hawks, led by Corkus, are planning on assassinating him. Guts readies himself for a fight. That is until Casca steps in. Despite hating Guts probably more than anyone, Casca isn't going to allow the men to go against Griffith's demands. When Corkus makes a sly remark about Casca only protecting Guts because she had to sleep with him, she raises her sword to his neck and dares him to say it again. This seems to get the mercs to back down. Next, we see the Hawks out on a mission. Griffith is planning an ambush attack on the opposing enemy army. To do this, they're going to cut through the river. He gives Guts the most dangerous job of all. He has to guard the rear and ensure that the Hawks have an escape route just in case. Casca is once again jealous of Griffith's apparent favoritism towards Guts. No, it's dangerous work, but also an important duty. He's not just doing this in order to test him. Griffith trusts the louse. The Hawks gear up and set out. Guts quietly takes out a few soldiers along the river. One of the guards of the enemy camp notices a few strange floating lights along the tree line. That's when the Hawks come out and launch a surprise attack. The ambush gives the Hawks the upper hand. They burn the enemy provisions and powder magazines. The general sends in the cavalry. Now, it's Guts' job to divert them away from the Hawks. The Golden Age, Chapter 7. Guts has the entire cavalry on his tail. Despite being outnumbered and outarmed, Guts is still able to fend off the enemy. Back at their fort, the Hawks celebrate their victory. Griffith asks Corkus where Guts is, but he doesn't know. He decides to gear up and look for Guts himself. Meanwhile, Guts is still being chased by the cavalry. He wanted to make sure there'd be no chance they can find where the Hawks are. He's still trying to fight them off, but after one of the cavalry shoots Guts' horse in the neck, he ends up tumbling to the ground. He almost accepts his fate until Griffith and some of the other Hawks come in for the rescue. Griffith grabs his hand and helps Guts on his horse. The cavalry is still after them. Unbeknownst to the cavalry, however, Griffith was leading them right into a trap. The Hawks fire their cannons, killing most of the cavalry and forcing the rest to retreat. Back at the fort, the Hawks can finally rest and celebrate their victory. Guts sits by himself. Some of the other Hawks, Rickert, Judo, and Pippin, tell him he should come and join their celebration. When Guts refuses, Pippin picks him up over his shoulder and brings him down to the rest of the guys. Something I found interesting in my research was that Mira had based the personalities of some of the Hawks on his actual friends he knew when he was growing up. Mira also stated that both Guts and Griffith were based on his own personality traits and that of his childhood friend and fellow manga artist Koji Mori. For the relationship between Guts and Griffith, I'm using myself and my close friend and fellow manga artist Koji Mori as a model. Which one of us is Guts and which is Griffith switches from time to time, but I think it serves as a symbol of male friendship. After some more arguing, Guts finally gives in and takes a drink. I think we're starting to see Guts loosen up a bit and start accepting his place among the other Hawks. As much as Guts can pretend he's a loner, There's an undeniable truth that people need to stick together. The Golden Age, Chapter 8. Guts sits by himself and reflects on the night before while he was celebrating with the other Hawks. Rykert comes to check on him. Guts says that he's never seen a mercenary group like the Hawks. Mercenary bands are never much different. They're savage, made mostly of rogues and men with shady pasts, you know? This is the kind of men Guts is used to being around. Gambino's mercenary were nothing but thugs and thieves. The Hawks are incredible and noble warriors. I was surprised by how young everyone here is, but that's not all. Here it's different somehow. Rykert tells him that it's because of Griffith. If anything, maybe I'd say Griffith. I'd say those who've been completely charmed by Griffith, those who figure as long as they stick with Griffith, they'll get to see great things. Anyway, all of us are here because of his charisma. Guts seems to have taken an interest when Rykert starts to describe Griffith. He asks what kind of man Griffith is. Rykert tells him that Griffith has a mysterious side to him. Sometimes he has a chilling look on his face. The next will have a childish smile. Sometimes he seems like a kid, and others he seems like an adult. Is he a good guy or a villain? No one really knows, but one thing is undeniable. There's a strange, powerful aura around Griffith. An aura that seems to draw others in like a great gravitational force. Guts says nothing, but it seems that he already knows what Rykert's talking about. He feels Griffith's power too. I can't really describe it. It's not just his swordsmanship and tactics. Ordinary people like us don't understand Griffith. It might take him longer than a lifetime to achieve it, but I guess he must have some kind of conviction. It's not whether he's a good guy or a bad guy. It's not whether we really know him or not. Isn't that just how it is when a man gathers other men together? Another hawk comes by and tells Guts that Griffith is asking for him. Guts walks in and sees Griffith bathing himself. The two start playing around with the water. We see Guts is having fun for the first time. When the two settle down, he notices Griffith is wearing a weird-looking necklace. Griffith is wearing a mini behelit. He says he bought it from an old gypsy fortune teller. The behelit, also called the egg of the king. The legend says that whoever possesses the behelit is destined to obtain the world in exchange for his own flesh and blood. This is the first time Guts has seen the behelit. In the Black Swordsman arc, he's almost terrified of it. He knows what it can do and what it's capable of. We know that when the Count used it, the God Hand made him sacrifice someone he loved so they can grant his desires. Going off of what we already know, I think it's obvious who he sacrificed. Guts asks Griffith why he went back to save him from the cavalry earlier. Griffith tells him that he couldn't lose such an excellent soldier in such a meaningless battle. Griffith tells Guts that he became the leader of the Hawks so he can one day achieve his ultimate goal, to have his own kingdom. You will fight for my cause, because you belong to me. I will decide the place where you die. Later, while standing by the water, Guts reflects on what Griffith told him. He thinks Griffith's dream is completely ridiculous. Yet, he can't help but admire his conviction. Guts reflects on his life over the last couple of years. He's been nothing more than a nomad, moving from place to place, but never having anywhere to call home, not having anyone to call a friend. As much as Guts hated joining the Hawks at first, it seems he's finally starting to turn around. We get a cute moment when Judo and Pippin knock Guts into the water as Ketsuka watches from afar. The Wind of Swords. In this world, is the destiny of mankind controlled by some transcendental entity or law? Is it like the hand of God hovering above? At least is it true that man has no control, even over his own will. Man takes up the sword in order to shield the small wound in his heart sustained in a far-off time beyond remembrance. Man wields the sword so that he may die smiling in some far-off time beyond perception. This chapter covers the 100-Year War, a conflict between the Kingdom of Midland and the Tudor Empire. The conflict started when Tudor captured one of Midland's capital fortresses near the border of Doldry. Tudor's Black Ram, Iron Lance, Heavy Cavalry, Jesus, that's a mouthful, is pushing the Midland army back. Though the Black Rams only have around 3,000 horsemen, they are slaughtering the much larger Midland army. Things are looking grim. That is until a lone horseman comes to aid Midland in battle. That horseman being Guts. He crashes through the Iron Rams' front line and slashes their warriors. All of the Rams surround Guts so they can close in. This was just a tactic to get them to break their formation. From the tree line, the rest of the Hawks join the battle. The Band of the Hawk, the mercenary band led by the White Hawk Griffith, the grim reapers of the battlefield. Within minutes, the Hawks drive the Ram back and force them to retreat. Back at their fort, the Hawks celebrate another victory. Guts gets praised for his work on the battlefield. He's been promoted to captain. He even has some men under his command now. This celebration is interrupted when Keska tells Guts she needs to talk to him. Since Gus became a captain, he and Keska have been at each other's throats. She's jealous of him. She's jealous that he's taking all of Griffith's attention away from her. She's angry at Guts for abandoning the attack and charging in on his own, which happens a lot. She says what Guts is doing is dangerous and reckless. He's jeopardizing the lives of the other Hawks just so he can get his first dibs in on the action. Instead of trying to fight back, Guts actually apologizes and says he won't do it again. Casca doesn't believe his apology. She calls him a mad dog, which angers Guts. Griffith comes and breaks the two up. Guts feels that he's been changed since joining the Hawks. He says that he actually does care for their lives. This is a big difference compared to Guts' general disdain for all other humanity in the Black Swordsman arc. He actually apologized to Griffith, too, for rushing into battle like he did. Griffith tells Guts that even that side of him, the unpredictable side, was all part of his plan. Later, we see Griffith being knighted by the king for his incredible leadership of the Hawks. The other noblemen are not happy about the decision. Griffith does not come from royal blood. This means that the Hawks will no longer be considered mercenaries. Now they're an official army. Some of the Hawks were within the castle to watch the ceremony. All the Hawks, except for Guts, that is. He's outside training yet again, as Griffith becomes an official knight for the Kingdom of Midland. He told Guts that he will have his own kingdom one day, and now he's gotten just one step closer to that goal. Nosferatu Zodd, Chapter 1. It was crimson, like a drop of blood, the Behelit, also called the Egg of the King. It said that whoever possesses this is destined to obtain the world in exchange for his own flesh and blood. I will get my own kingdom. That's what he said 3 years ago. The Hawks have almost taken over an entire enemy base. The only thing stopping them is one single soldier, Nosferatu Zodd. Zodd is a legendary swordsman who's said to have killed thousands of men on the battlefield. The rumor says that Zodd is immortal. He can die on the battlefield one day and show up on another battle later on. The legend of Nosferatu Zodd has been told for over 100 years. That's why they call him Nosferatu. Some of the Hawks don't believe the rumors. Whether everything they say about Zodd is real or not, one thing is for sure, and it's that he's an incredible force on the battlefield. Guts is down in the fortress with his men. He's irate because he sent 50 men to the fortress and hasn't seen any of them for over an hour. His men hold him back because they can't afford to lose him. It's one man. A single enemy got all 500 of the band of the Hawk Raiders stuck like nails in a wall. If one warrior is keeping the band of the Hawks at bay, then it can only mean one thing, that it's Nosferatu Zodd. One of Guts' men, Dilios, comes stumbling out of the castle with his arm and half his body missing. Zodd. Nosferatu. Not willing to lose any more men, Guts says he's going in alone. As he walks through the hall of the castle, he sees the bloody and mutilated remains of all his men. It's a total bloodbath. What's with these corpses? Men in full armor torn apart like ragdolls. It feels like something incredibly strong blew right through them. Guts has seen thousands of battles at this point. He's seen far more death and destruction than any single person should. But this is something he's never seen, could never have imagined. As Guts advances through the halls, he stumbles across a scene that completely horrifies him. The severed heads and corpses of his men stacked one on top of the other. There's only one man, one thing that could have done this. Zodd. Outraged, Guts charges him. Zodd hurls some bodies at him and goes flying back. At this point in life, Guts has never felt anything nearly as powerful as Zodd. Remember, this isn't the Guts we saw in the Black Swordsman arc. This is a much younger and naive Guts. He hasn't fought any apostles yet. What the hell is this? Nosferatu Zodd, Chapter 2. Guts is completely stunned. He can't even move. He has never seen any man or creature like this. It seems that all the crazy rumors the Hawks were talking about earlier were completely true. Zodd is a monster. Zodd swings again, and somehow Guts is able to block it. Zodd goes for another swing, and Guts is narrowly able to dodge while Zodd completely destroys the column behind him. If it wasn't for Guts' amazing strength and speed, he probably would have been dead already, just like all his other Hawks. Despite Zodd's monstrous size, he is still incredibly fast. Guts is able to block his strikes for a while, but eventually he ends up flying backwards into the wall. He's a monster. Zodd is impressed that Guts is able to keep up with him. Superb. Not one man in 50 years has been able to stop my sword this long. Guts has been in hundreds of battles at this point, but all those battles were against people. For a monster like Zodd, he has no clue what to do. He realizes that the only reason he's able to deflect so many of Zodd's strikes is because of the size of his own sword. The swords are evenly matched. He can use this to his advantage. Guts readies himself to go for a big strike. Zodd takes it as a challenge, sword versus sword. Zodd accepts the challenge and goes for the killing blow. Shockingly, Guts wins this. He breaks Zodd's sword with the Dragon Slayer. For the first and only time, Zodd is vulnerable. Guts takes his chance and plunges the Dragon Slayer deep into Zodd's shoulder. Unfortunately for Guts, all of this was for nothing. Zodd pulls the Dragon Slayer right out of his shoulder. What a surprise. After being pushed back that far, I never thought you'd try and break my sword. You're the first human to ever drive a sword that deep into my body. In these past 300 years of slaughter, Zodd becomes even more monstrous than before. He grows gigantic horns and fangs. Nosferatu Zodd, Chapter 3. Guts is absolutely terrified. His legs are shaking and he starts to sweat. We've seen Guts afraid before, but nothing we've seen is compared to this. He is filled with pure dread. This is great. So long ago I'd forgotten the feeling of blood boiling. To make this feeling my own again, on the chance I might come across an enemy like you. Maybe that's why I've remained alive these 300 years. Now, fight. Don't disappoint me. It's been a long time since Zodd has had a worthy opponent. Guts is probably the closest thing to a fight Zodd has had in over 300 years. Zodd swipes Guts across the room. Guts narrowly escapes as Zodd charges at him through the wall. Guts turns around and swings back on Zodd, but his sword bounces off and deflects off his horn. Zodd hits him across the room once again. Guts hits his head against the wall and collapses on the floor. What's wrong? What is it? Is this all the power you've got? No. Guess I should say you did well for a human, but I won't show mercy. If you can't fight, I'll tear you apart. Zodd digs his claws into Guts' shoulder and starts to pull. Before Zodd can tear Guts in two, a volley of arrows hits him in the back. It's Griffith and the other Hawks. I really like the subtle detail here with the little sweat beads on Griffith's face. He's completely composed, but I think it shows that even Griffith is afraid of Zodd. All the Hawks are completely stunned by the monster they're looking at. None of them have seen anything like Zodd before, which is kind of interesting to me. In the Black Swordsman arc, it almost seemed like monsters like Zodd and the Baron and the Count were known to exist in this universe. Like everyone knew about them. I wonder if something happened in between these two arcs that made monsters more common in the world. Griffith orders his men to fire a second volley at Zodd. The arrows do very little against Zodd to slow him down. He tells the Hawks that he won't let them interfere with his battle. He charges into them, killing multiple Hawks at once. Guts begs the Hawks to forget about him and run away. He knows at this point, fighting Zodd is a losing battle, no matter how many Hawks they have. Zodd starts tearing his way through the Hawks' front line. Griffith tells Keska to take everyone who's alive and draw them back. Meanwhile, Griffith runs to Guts and picks him up over his shoulder. Dumb bastard! Why are you here? You can complain after we've escaped from that monster. Where are you going? Your heart's still beating. If you made it this far into the video, I want to give a huge thank you. I know a lot of people really loved the last video. I'm sorry this one took a lot longer to come out. But I never really planned for this to be like a continuous one after the other thing. It's always going to be kind of an other monthly, other upload kind of thing. I want to take my time with the series. I do. I like talking about Berserk. I really do. It's such an amazing series. And I'm happy you guys have given me the opportunity to go through it with you and sort of go on this adventure together. So thank you. If you like what you saw today, please like, comment, subscribe. Tell me if you have been liking the series so far and if you want me to continue on with part 3. Other than that, for anyone that doesn't know, I have a second channel now called Into the Depths Live, where I exclusively stream from every Friday and Saturday. So if you haven't yet, I'll leave a description down below. Just go over and check out the live channel and try and catch me when I'm live. I'd also like to encourage you to please check out my Patreon. It's only $1 a month, and for that, you get a lot of cool stuff like access to our exclusive Discord. You get all the videos early and uncensored. You get regular video updates, and you also get a shout out at the end of the video, which I'm going to do now. I'd like to give a special shout out to Onyx, Trotten King, Kieran Dow, Seth, Carscale Golden, Tyler Kruzik, Anthony Ferrara, Karen Ferrara, Alexander Gospudin, Smokin' Void, and Sidio Troy. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So, I'll see you next time, everyone. See ya.